Welcome to this video tutorial for Escape the Minotaur's Maze, where we will teach you how to play the basic version of the game. We hope you enjoyed watching our game setup tutorial video to help you get ready to play. Let's look at what the play area should look like for a completed two-player basic game setup. You have your completed 5x5 grid of maze cards or tiles with a double-sided exit card in the center. Now remember, maze cards are maze tiles, and we'll use the names cards and tiles interchangeably for the rest of this video. You have your two start locations, one for each player, at opposite corners of the maze. Each player has their character card in front of them with the 3 life tokens placed on it. Each player also has their corresponding color meeples on their start locations. Each player has 4 cards dealt with them to play that they're holding in their hand, and the dungeon draw deck is also ready for play. The big orange Minotaur meeple is on the exit card, eager to catch you, and the 4-sided die that moves the Minotaur is ready and waiting. The 3 and 4 player setups should look very similar, except for the larger maze and more character cards and meeples for the additional players. So let's get started then. In the basic version of the game, the players take on the roles of the friends during their childhood days. You start out trapped in your own cell in the Minotaur's maze. The object of the basic game is to be the first person to escape the maze. Each player has 3 life tokens. These are how many escape attempts you have. Once you lose them all, you're out of the game. So in each player's turn, the player can perform or take 5 actions in the exact order shown here. You can explore one adjacent tile, replace one explored tile anywhere in the maze, move one space, discard one card from your hand, and draw back up to 4 cards in your hand. Now do remember, many of these actions are optional, so sometimes it may be wise to choose not to do some of them. Your experience is going to tell you what's best. In this tutorial, we will go deeper into each of these actions and provide some strategic tips as well. So play in the game then proceeds clockwise from the first player, and the round gets completed when all the players have taken a turn, right? The Minotaur gets to take turns after every single player. So let's look at an example for a 3-player game. First, player 1 takes their turn. Then the Minotaur takes a turn. Now player 2 takes a turn. Then the Minotaur takes a turn again. Finally, player 3 takes their turn, and then the Minotaur takes their turn yet again, and this completes the round. So, in a 3-player game, the Minotaur gets to go 3 times every round, and we have 3 Minotaur turns for each individual player's turn. In other words, watch out. Let's look at how exploring one adjacent tile works. For a lot of these examples, we'll zoom into a smaller portion of the maze just to make it easier to see. So first, let's start by defining what adjacent means. An adjacent tile is one that is a neighbor to the current tile. In this game, adjacent means any tile that is touching one of the 4 sides of the current tile. So diagonal tiles are not considered to be adjacent. So for the current tile which is blinking, the tiles with yes are considered adjacent, but the tiles with no are not adjacent. When you start your game in the jail cell start location, right? And at this point, you have only one option for exploration. That's the tile that your path leads to. You could explore this tile, and you will explore this tile by flipping it over to reveal the maze path on the other side. Now, notice the tiny compass icon on the card. That tells you the orientation that card is supposed to have. After you flip the card over, you must line it up with the compass on the exit card in the middle of the maze. So just rotate the card so that it lines up. Now, here's a quick tip. If you find that the compass directions are tiny and hard to read, you don't have to read them. Just make sure that your compass is always on the same corner of the card as the exit tile, and you're fine. In this case, if the exit tile has a compass on the top right corner, just make sure every other card you flip over has the compass on the top right corner, and you're good to go. Let's now look at a game that has progressed further. You, the player with the yellow meeple, are on this tile shown here. What can you explore? You can only explore paths that are open for you to travel, which are shown by the two arrows. You cannot explore a tile that you have no way to move to. You also cannot explore a tile that's already explored and face up. In this particular case, you have only one option, since the tile at the end of the other path is already explored. In this next case, you now have two unexplored tiles as options, but you get to explore only one tile per turn, so you must choose. Your choice will depend on what the maze looks like, what path you want to take towards the exit, and where the Minotaur and the other players are at that point in time. In this next case, the only paths that are open for you to travel are the ones that lead to tiles that are already explored, or they head off the maze altogether. So you cannot explore any further. So you would just skip the explore step and go on to the next action. Now, exploring is optional, but it is critical to winning the game. So skipping exploration when you actually can explore is something that you should really think carefully about. After exploration comes the opportunity to change or replay tiles. You are the player with the yellow meeple again, and you're shown on the tile here. Your opponent is now the player with the red meeple, also shown nearby. You just explore the tile that's blinking to your left, but unfortunately, it isn't very useful. It's blocking your movement. It's actually making a nice and direct path to the exit for your opponent. Remember, you have 4 cards or tiles in your hand. If you have a good alternative tile in your hand, you can use that to replace or swap out the tile you don't like. In this example, you made your path a bit easier and your opponent's path a bit harder. These type of moves could easily sway the outcome of the game. Let's look at another example where you are the yellow meeple and your opponent is the red meeple. Now, remember, you can replace any explored tile anywhere on the maze. It doesn't have to be adjacent or even connected to your path. However, there are certain fixed tiles that you cannot replace ever, like the exit tile, the start locations. Also, you cannot replace tiles that any player or the Minotaur are currently occupying. So it has to be an unoccupied tile that's not the exit and not the start. You could replace those, and it has to be explored. You can't replace an unexplored tile. In this case, your paths are clear. Any replacement would really not help you that much. However, you have the opportunity to mess with your opponent by blocking their path. By replacing the explored tile in their direct path, you prevent your opponent from moving until they can use their own replace action during their next turn to swap out that tile. So remember, again, replacing or swapping tiles is optional. So if you don't want to do it, just skip the step. However, it is strategically important. So plan on using this action to help you win. After replacement comes the opportunity or chance to move to adjacent tiles. 3 players are shown here with the yellow, the red, and the purple meeples. They are situated on different tiles. Now, player movement is very simple. You can move one space in any direction that the path allows you to go. Why only one space? Because you're trying to be stealthy and discreet. You don't want to alert the Minotaur. For the yellow meeple player, they can go west or left. They can go south or down, or even east or right to be in the exact same space or tile as the purple meeple player. There is no restriction and multiple players can occupy the same tile. Now for the purple meeple player, there are fewer options. They can only go west or left since their tile has only 2 paths and one of them goes to an unexplored location. Now, let's say the Minotaur were also on the board at this location. There is a restriction that players cannot move onto a tile that the Minotaur is already occupying. So for the red meeple player, this actually eliminates all movement options. They cannot move north or up since it's unexplored. They cannot move east or right since there's no continuous path. And they cannot also move south or down since the Minotaur's there. In this case, they cannot move at all, and they're forced to skip the move action. As with all the other actions so far, moving is optional. Choose wisely. Let's now talk about the last two actions, discarding cards and drawing back up. You can discard one card from your hand each turn. This goes to a common discard pile for all the players. This action is useful if you have duplicates of certain cards in your hand, or if you want to search for a particular card, or you just want to refresh the cards in your hand. Now, discarding a card is optional. You can skip this step if you want to. At the end of your turn, you will replenish the cards in your hand by drawing cards from the dungeon draw deck so that you're back up to 4 cards in your hand. Now, please do remember, drawing back up to 4 is the only step that is not optional. Strategically speaking, a player who chose to not discard and to not replace during that one turn wouldn't have used any cards. So they would still have 4 cards in their hand and they would not be able to draw any new cards. Now, yes, they get to keep their current hand as is. This may not be optimal. So it's usually a good game strategy to discard a card each turn so that your hand slowly refreshes as the game proceeds. After a player has taken all their actions, it's the Minotaur's turn. So the player to the right of the player who just finished their turn rolls the 4-sided die to determine the direction of the Minotaur's movement. This die roll signifies that the Minotaur moves randomly while hunting for the cunning young explorers. Unlike the explorers who need to maintain stealth to escape, the Minotaur has no such limitations. That's why the Minotaur can move indefinitely. The Minotaur only stops moving when they're blocked and they can move no further. Until then, the player who's rolling the 4-sided die for the Minotaur continues to roll and move the Minotaur. So on a roll of 1, the Minotaur tries to move up or north. On a roll of 2, the Minotaur tries to move east or right. On a roll of 3, the Minotaur tries to move south or down. On a roll of 4, the Minotaur tries to move west or left. Now let's look at 4 potential movement scenarios, some of which lead to successful moves and some of which lead to blocked moves. If the path is clear in the direction chosen by the die, the Minotaur just moves one space in that direction. In the example shown, if the die roll was a 2, the path to the east is clear, the Minotaur moves one space east or right. The Minotaur's turn continues. The player keeps rolling the 4-sided die. If the current tile would allow the Minotaur to move in a chosen direction, but the destination is blocked, then the Minotaur can actually warp reality by rotating this tile clockwise until a clear path lines up. In this example, let's say the Minotaur die was a 3, then the path to south exists, but the destination tile was blocked. So the Minotaur would rotate the destination tile clockwise until a clear path lined up. Then the Minotaur would move south or down. The Minotaur's turn would continue, and the player would keep rolling the 4-sided die. Now, there are some things to note about the Minotaur's reality warping ability. This ability to warp reality is a unique power that only the Minotaur possesses. Players cannot do this. However, though the Minotaur is powerful, they still cannot warp reality for tiles that are already occupied by any of the other players. Also remember, when these rotations happen, that tile is no longer going to align with the rest of the maze for the compass orientation. And this is okay. It's just a reflection of how the Minotaur continually warps the reality of the maze to suit their needs. So let's now say there was a player on the tile to the south. Then the Minotaur would not have been able to rotate it and move to it. In such a case, the Minotaur's motion is blocked. At that point, the Minotaur's turn ends. Now, if the direction is chosen such that the current tile itself has no clear path in that direction, then the Minotaur gets blocked because it cannot move. In this example, say the die roll is a 4. There's no path to the west on the current tile itself, so the Minotaur cannot move west or left. It's blocked. At that point, the Minotaur stops moving, the Minotaur's turn ends, and it goes on to the next player. Lastly, let's say the direction chosen was such that the destination tile is unexplored. Then the Minotaur can't move also, and it's blocked. In this example shown, say the die roll is a 1. Even though there's a path to north on the current tile, the destination tile is unexplored. So the Minotaur can't move there, and it's blocked. So the Minotaur stops moving, and the Minotaur turn ends. What's important to remember here is the maze is never static. It changes throughout the game due to player replacement actions and the Minotaur's ability to warp reality. Your strategies will need to adapt and be equally flexible. The Minotaur has one other reality bending ability. They can wrap around the edges of the maze. What does this mean? It means that if the Minotaur is on one edge of the maze, and they have a clear path to the exactly opposite tile on the other side of the maze, they can move there. Think of this as the maze being in its own bubble of space-time, and the Minotaur controls it, therefore there are no edges for the Minotaur. Now, of course, this is yet again another power that's unique to the Minotaur, not available to the players who are just mere mortals. As for the rules of motion, whatever we just went over still applies in these scenarios. The Minotaur still gets blocked and the turn still ends. The Minotaur can still warp reality by rotating destination tiles. So let's look at some examples to make this a little more concrete. Let's say the Minotaur were at this location shown and the die roll was a 3, meaning go south or down. Technically, there's no south since we're at the bottommost tile of the maze. However, if you think of the maze as infinitely repeating, such that the top row of tiles repeats under the bottom row of tiles, then the Minotaur would go down and reappear from the top, in essence, wrapping around the maze as shown. Of course, a clear path must exit for this to happen. In this case, the Minotaur moves successfully and the turn continues. Now let's say the Minotaur were at the location shown and the die roll was a 2, meaning go east or right. The current tile would allow the Minotaur to go east, but the destination wasn't rotated right. So the Minotaur would then warp reality, rotate the destination clockwise until it lined up, and then the Minotaur would move successfully and the turn would still continue. Now, let's say the Minotaur were at the location shown here and the die roll were a 2, meaning go east or right. The current tile would have let the Minotaur go east or right, but the destination at the other far end of the maze was unexplored. The Minotaur can't do anything more. They're blocked. This would end the Minotaur's turn. In this final example, let's say the Minotaur were at a location shown as there and the die roll is a 1, meaning go north or up. Even though the destination tile, the one all the way at the bottom of the maze, is explored and it could be rotated if needed, the current tile doesn't have any path up north, so the Minotaur couldn't do anything more and they would be blocked, and this would end the Minotaur's turn. So this covers movements involving wrapping around the maze. Important thing to remember is all the rules that we covered for standard Minotaur movements and the ending of the Minotaur turns applies directly to all wraparound movements as well. Let's now talk about the process of getting captured by the Minotaur and getting eliminated from the game. As the game progresses, you and other players are trying to escape while the Minotaur is randomly hunting you all. Say the Minotaur happens to move onto a tile that you are currently on. What now? When the Minotaur moves onto a tile that you are currently occupying, the Minotaur has captured you. You get magically transported back to the jail cell where you started your game, and the Minotaur also travels back to the exit tile to guard it from other escape attempts. This automatically ends the Minotaur's turn. On the next turn of the Minotaur, movement would start from the exit tile. You lose 1 life token for failing your escape attempt. In this particular example, you had all 3 to start with. You end up with 2 life tokens remaining. Say you had already lost 2 of your life tokens when you got captured, then you would lose your last life token. Anytime you lose your last life token, you are out of the game or you are eliminated from the game. So what does it take to win the game? Well, any player who's able to stay on the exit tile for one entire round of gameplay wins the game. Now, what does that mean? Say player 1 moved to the exit tile on their turn. They now need to survive at this spot and escape the Minotaur until their turn comes back around. At the beginning of their next turn, if they are still on the exit tile and they still haven't been captured, then they win the game. So this is not easy for more than one reason. Between when the player moves to the exit tile and when their turn comes back around, the Minotaur will get to move multiple times. The player could get captured at any time during this point. Also, if the Minotaur captures anyone else, the Minotaur moves back to the exit. If that happens, then the player who's waiting on the exit to win also gets captured. This could be another way you potentially lose. Now, though there are rules that prevent players from moving onto the Minotaur tile and getting themselves captured, there could still be strategies where players may decide to risk their lives to prevent others from winning, especially if they have life tokens to spare. Think of this as yet another way to mess with your opponents. Now, if any player does manage to survive an entire round on the exit tile, then at the beginning of the next turn, they are the winner. They have escaped the Minotaur's maze. Thank you for your interest in Escape the Minotaur's Maze, an original creation by the 3 of us at Twin Moon Games. Please be sure to check out our other video tutorials on how to set up the game and how to play the advanced version of the game. The artwork in this game was provided by Drea D Illustrations. Please visit the artist Drea D on Instagram. Many thanks to our playtesters for helping us make the game balanced, engaging, and fun to play. If you have any questions, comments, or would like to reach out to us, please contact us at info@twinmoongames.com or visit us on the web at www.twinmoongames.com. Thank you, and we hope you have fun trying to escape the Minotaur's maze.